Hi, everybody. Again, this is the Take Me Away panel. This is a panel about why do writers write and readers read? And it's a panel devoted to going on fictional journeys. And so I kind of decided that as I'm moderating this panel, I would talk to our lovely writers here today about both writing and reading. And I'm going to kind of divide our time here today about talking about halves. We'll start by talking about reading, and then we'll move into talking about writing. So I'm Charlotte Greene. I'll be your moderator today. And with me today, we have panelists Andrew Huerta, Kathleen Knowles, Sam Ledel, Morgan Lee Miller, Aurora Ray, and Vali. And I'll also just sort of tell you all listeners and panelists, that's more or less the order I'm going to go in today because I have no imagination and we'll get confused, but I'll try and switch halfway. So those of you at the end will sometimes go first and vice versa. And I wanted to start today by having everyone introduce themselves and also talk briefly about their most recent book that you hopefully are promoting here at our Bold Starts Bookathon. So we're going to go again first with Andrew Huerta. If you could please introduce yourself and your book.
Okay, good evening. I'm Andrew Elwenta. I write literary fiction, both short stories and novels. My new book is called A Different Man. It's right back there. And it is a diverse collection of stories that focus on the lives and experiences of gay men. The collection includes 13 short stories that follow the life trajectory of gay men as each one deals with an adventure or some sort of challenge within their lives. So it's great to be here.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Knowles. I write primarily lesbian romance, some historical romance, and some general LGBTQ fiction, and I live in San Francisco, and this is A Fairer Tomorrow. This is the book I am just the Bold Strokes just released in December, and it is about two young women who meet at the end of World War II. As you see from the picture, I hope you can see from the picture, one of them's African American, although that term was not used in the 40s, and one's white. And so they have a lot of stuff to overcome over the course of this story. Thanks.
I think I was next, but I'll jump in here. Hi, everyone. I'm Sam Ledel.
Sorry, I'm having some tech issues.
No problem. So my most recent release is Wildflower Words. It's a historical romance that takes place in 1930s rural Utah in a small mining community, which features a romance between a woman who works at the local restaurant with her family and a woman who's just moved to town with her father who works in the mine, and she ends up getting a job with the Pack Horse Library.
I think I might be next. I'm Morgan Lee Miller. I just published my 5th book with Bold Strokes Books. I'm going to be talking about The Infinite Summer, which is a young adult romance. It's about 18-year-old Remy, and she has to spend the summer with her dad in this summer beach town, and she meets her first love there.
We're going in alpha order, at least at this point. I'm Aurora Ray. I'm a college dean by day and a writer the rest of the time. And my latest release is actually a pair of releases that I got by Bold Strokes Books. Is A Convenient Arrangement. The other is called Love Accidentally, and it's put out by Jamie's publisher, Bella Books. And they follow 4 people in a parallel timeline in Colorado.
Hi, I'm Vali. I think I have number 32 or 33 is coming out in May. It's called Writer's Block. The latest one I have out right now is Turbulent Waves, which is the sequel to the Atlanta story. But I write romance, I write paranormal, I write romantic intrigue, Anything, this new one should be very, very different. It's not anything like I've written before, but I think it's funny. Hopefully everyone else will think it's funny as well. So
we're going to get started with my first question. Hopefully I'll be able to get my camera rolling again. I did want to mention before we get into the questions that there's a 20% off sale at Bold Strokes Books for many of the backlist authors involved in this week's Bookathon. I'll mention that sale a couple of times, and I think Sandy will be nice enough to throw that link in our chat. And again, remember, you can throw in a question in the Q&A, and I will get to those questions kind of every other question or so. All right, and my first question for everybody: when did you first start writing, and what was your first finished piece? Andrew, when did you first start writing?
Let's see. I remember starting my first book in the 3rd grade. I think it was. I did a little picture book, and then from there, I think I've been working on a novel ever since, off and on. But the first piece I really finished was when I, let's see, the first one I finished was in college. I think I was a freshman in college. It's a novel that definitely had a beginning, a middle, and an end. I think before that, I never quite made it to the end. I could start and get a lot of momentum going, but that's definitely the one that I brought to an ending, and it's the one I started to share with my parents and other people around me, other published authors. So really, that I started in college, and then I really went from novels to short story after that as I continued on with my education. I got my master's degree in creative writing. So it's been a while. I've been writing for a while now.
Great, thank you so much, Andrew. And Kathleen, when did you first start writing? What was your first finished piece?
Okay, I've been thinking about the answer to this question, and I haven't found a really effective one, but I'm pretty sure I started writing a novel when I was like 13 or 14 or something like that. I don't know what the heck. I was starting to learn French. My characters were French for some reason. But I went through a lot of learning process around writing nonfiction. So the first things I really completed were assignments for a class I was taking, and again, there was I wrote a small piece for a newspaper in the early 80s, and then I started reading Bold Strokes books, and a friend of mine online said, you know, you could probably write a romance novel, and I had a thought about that for a long time. So I would call the first finished piece I ever wrote. I mean, I wrote some fan fiction too, but I wrote my first novel, and it got published by Bold Strokes back in 2012. That's it.
Thanks so much, Kathleen. Again, I do apologize for my issues over here.
That's okay. I can see your name and I can hear your voice. That's good enough.
Great.
We can see your face.
Sam, yeah. Sam, would you tell us, again, when did you first start writing?
Sure. Well, sort of like Andrew was saying, I started writing many things for as long as I can remember. There's lots of unfinished projects on the shelves. But the first book I actually sat down to write and to finish was around my senior year of college. To right after I graduated college, I was a creative writing major, so I was full of, you know, energy and had the stamina to sit down and write, and was very motivated at that time to get that done. And I did it, which was very exciting. And I sent it off to many places and was rejected by every single one. So it was a bit of a learning curve, and sort of a good lesson ultimately. But despite all the rejection, it did show me that I could do it. And so when the time came for me to, you know, be in a good space to be able to sit down and write again, I knew I'd done it once before, so I could do it again, which ended up being Rocks and Stars, my first book that came out with Bold Strokes Books.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing that. Morgan, how about you?
So my story is similar to Sam's. I started writing, I was probably around 5. I had this dream about a blue hippo, and I thought it was good enough to write a story. And then I kept writing throughout high school. I was writing all in my notebooks, handwriting every single story. And that was this one story I had that I was writing all throughout high school and rewrote like at least 5 times. That was like my first finished from beginning to end story. But I kept writing in college. I was a creative writing major. And I wrote another story and spent all my summer days, all 4 years, trying to submit it to agents and perfecting that query letter and getting a lot of rejections. But I like to also think that that was my first finished story as well, because I thought it was ready to be published. It got rejected a lot, but it was actually one of the very, very beginning drafts of my second novel, which is Hammer Strings and Beautiful Things. So I think it all worked out for the best.
Thanks again, Morgan. Thanks so much. And Aurora.
I love hearing all these stories. I think I definitely wrote as a kid in college. After abandoning my biochemistry major, I became an English major and wrote a lot, but also really liked to fancy myself a writer. I spent a lot of time in coffee shops with a notebook staring into space and writing first pages of things. I did write a short YA novel as like my senior honors thesis in college, but then kind of set all that aside. And it wasn't until like 2012, maybe 2013, a friend of mine challenged me to do National Novel Writing Month. And that was like the first time in my life that I actually established a daily writing practice. And that actually became the startings of my second novel. But as soon as I finished National Novel Writing Month, I sat down, I was like, oh, I can write a book. And I sat down and started what would become Winter's Harbor, which is my first full novel published with Bold Strokes.
Fantastic, thank you. And Allie, last but not least.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I took a creative writing class in college and I completely sucked at it. So maybe I wasn't ready. I remember writing a story about, I don't know, a seagull, maybe, I forget what it was. But anyway, it wasn't until, I don't know, it was one Christmas and I got the first 3 Harry Potter books, which I really enjoyed. I didn't think I would. I mean, I looked at Carol when she bought them and it's like, what is this? It's like children's books. So it was like J.K. Rowling before she totally lost her mind. So I really enjoyed them. And then I kind of, read about her story a little bit. And up to then I'm really good at writing grants and memos, business letters, that kind of thing. So if you need somebody who needs to be just on the edge of rude to get stuff done in a business letter, that's me. So I decided, I wonder if I can sit down and actually write a book. And so I actually wrote Carly Sound. It's the only book that's ever come to me with a beginning, a middle, and an end. It took me about a month to write it. It wasn't that, I thought it was wonderful. And then I turned it in and they were like, no, it's good, but it needs a lot of editing. So after that, they asked if I had anything else. And I had actually, once I started writing, it's like all of a sudden, I don't know, it was either mental illness or, my muse finally woke up. So I had all these characters running around in my head and I had written, it had taken me like a year, I guess. And I ended up writing, it was the first 2 parts. I wrote it as one book, but the first 2 parts of the Devil series, which was really the only 2 I ever planned to write. And then after that, we were off to the races, so to speak. So it's been after that, I like to try new things. I like to explore different kind of plots. So it's been fun.
Yeah, thanks everybody for that. I think a lot of readers love to know kind of where people start and how they got where they are. I do want to switch now over to a question from one of our Q&A questions. And if Kathleen, you didn't see, there's a question specifically to you if you want to answer that one. And we might have time at the end to look at your answer. But Renee Roman asked the whole panel, do you have a routine when you begin a manuscript? So how do you start, basically? I think that's a great question, and maybe certainly helpful to those of us that write, but also those of us that maybe want to be writers, possibly people in the panel or in the participants that want to become writers themselves. But yeah, how do you get started? And let's go ahead and just to mix things up a little bit here, go in reverse order. So that'll be Allie, and then Aurora, Morgan, Sam, Kathleen, Andrew. So Allie, how do you start a manuscript?
I start with a shower, and I like to stare at the window of my shower. I have a window in my shower, and everybody that comes over, it's like, you don't have curtains on the shower, the window. But my house is raised. It's a old Louisiana, house, so it's up on like 3 feet off the ground. So if you would like to get on a ladder and actually stare at me in the shower, with an A for effort. So I like to look outside. I look at the birds, the trees outside, and I get ideas. And then after I get ideas, I'm probably the only weirdo on the panel, but it has to be this notebook. They sell them at Office Depot. And a pen. And I actually write all my stories. And when I say I write them, I take one of my trusty pens and I sit and I write. I have a huge collection of fountain pens, nice pens from all over the world. And then so I sit and I write. The only thing that I actually type up at first is my character Bible. I have a tendency to have a large cast of characters, especially in the Devil series. I think it's like 4 pages now, because it's people who are still alive, many people that are dead. In case I need to refer back to them, I have to remember who they are. So it was fun, because like I said, I got a new editor about a couple of years ago, I guess. So we had done a bunch of books, and then it came to the first Devil series, and we've been talking a lot about emotion. And it's like, okay, we're going to take all that, just throw it out the window when it comes to this next book, because she can't be all that emotional. She's a mob boss. So actually now Kane is a little bit, probably a little softer than she was before. Emotions are good, I've been told. So we've been using them. But that's my process. And I can write anywhere. Yeah, I mean, I can write at the mall, I can write at home, at the coffee shop, where it doesn't really, in front of the TV, I can write anywhere. But that's my process. It's that black notebook, a nice pen, and
I envy that. I know I've seen you on social media talking about your lovely pen collection. I think I remember one that you got in Italy, I believe. And,
oh yeah.
Like, yeah, that would be really nice. I can't even read my own handwriting, so let alone.
Yeah, that was I don't know. I was on a plane one time, and the lady served drinks and everything, and then came back and said, "I just wanted to tell you that you have lovely handwriting." And it was like,
oh, that's nice.
And I have tiny handwriting, which I don't know. A lot of people make fun of me for it, but it's like, I don't know what that means. Maybe I'm a psychopath. Yeah. I have no idea.
All right. Thank you so much, Ellie. All right, Aurora, how about you? How do you get started?
Well, I think I get my start when I'm slogging through sort of finishing my current manuscript and really don't want to write it anymore. So I do lots of fun daydreaming about what the next story is going to be. I start with a proposal and sort of my attempt at an outline. I sort of think for me, making as many decisions like that as possible ahead of time and really having a sense of what the arc and what the beats of the story are going to be makes writing a lot easier, especially because I gasp right out of order. I think having a sense of a lot of the things that that are going to happen in the story on that front lately, and I pay the price for it because I end up sort of flailing about a lot more than I might otherwise. I wish I could handwrite more. I sort of find it a very romantic thing, but I type way faster than I write, and because I don't write in order, it's got to be me and Scrivener up close and personal.
Wow,
Good.
right in order. I can't even imagine. I mean, that's amazing. I think I would like to do that. I mean, I do sometimes be like, come back to this, and then but is it just sort of like what mood you're in that day, or?
I mean, I theoretically try to write in order and I start in order, but then when I kind of get stuck, it's sort of a catch. It's sort of a trade-off, right? You're not stuck because you can just go write something else, but then sometimes I just jump ahead and write something that I know is going to happen later on.
Wow.
And so I always gripe about the last like 20,000 words of a story, and it's not the end, it's actually like stringing everything together in a way that actually makes sense, which is why I hate it so much.
Wow, that's incredible. Very interesting. Thank you, Aurora. I appreciate it. All right. Morgan, how about you? Your routine.
So just gonna continue to talk about what Aurora was talking about. I have a similar process where I start having an idea where I get when I'm writing in my current work in progress and I'm starting to like really get over the story. So I start brainstorming of all the things I can write about. I start writing it. I like to outline. I want to get to know my characters before I really like dive into it. So I do some character profile stuff. And I should probably just like start proposing when the idea comes, but I get scared that if I propose, because I have this thing where once I propose the story and it gets accepted, I writer's block all the way through, and I struggled for like the rest of the time. So I tried to have maybe like a third of the story written because I feel like I'm going to jinx myself, but I jinx myself anyway, so it really doesn't matter. And I don't write by hand. I've been through that life in high school. I don't know how Allie does it. I think Sam writes by hand too, and it really just hurts my wrist. So I start writing, and sometimes it's not in order. One of the best things I heard one of my college professors say that was mind-blowing to me was that you don't have to write in order. You can just write. And I trip up a lot when I start writing story, when I try to write in order, and I just want to get words on a page. So I do hop around a little bit. So even when I'm proposing for my manuscript, it's still kind of a mix and match of scenes, but I kind of have an idea of where it's going to go. Sometimes I don't really follow that idea once I get accepted and start writing it. But yeah, I try to have a pretty decent foundation of the story before I propose it.
Yeah, I definitely feel you with the proposal. I feel like once you submit that, you're locked into that, and then
Everything's gone. I don't have anything.
yeah, you're like, that's it, that's all. I had that 2 pages. That's the whole book, right? Yeah. So absolutely. It sounds like I don't know. At least from, and I keep going back to writing out of order. With both you and Aurora, wow. I don't know if that's just that I don't plan my books, and this will be a question later on, possibly about planners versus pantsers, but yeah, that's great. Okay. All right, well, thank you so much, Morgan. How about you, Sam? Did I hear right that maybe you're also a handwriter? What do you do to get started?
I am a handwriter. Yes, all my manuscripts are done first by hand. Yeah. I wish I had the pen collection though that you do, Vali. I'm still working my way up to that. But I do have a specific pen I like to write everything with, or a specific style of pen. I have to handwrite. It's just something that for some reason it just feels like it flows better when it's coming from my hand to the page, and so that's how it works, and how it will continue to work for as long as I can hold a pen. But yeah, I kind of feel like I can pick pieces of everybody's responses so far in terms of my process for getting started. There's always I'm writing down my ideas in the beginning of the manuscript into a notebook. And the proposal process has been really beneficial for me, I would say, because my first book that I had, I didn't really have the proposal process because I just submitted it to Bold Strokes, and then was fortunate enough that they accepted it. So with that one, I wrote out of order, and it was very sort of just like a hodgepodge of things that miraculously ended up coming into a story. But ever since then, I found the proposal process very helpful in that I can actually take a step back and think, oh, okay, let me take a second to outline the story. It should have a beginning, middle, and end. And especially with the trilogy that I wrote, that required an incredible amount of planning in order to make sure that the storylines were being followed through over the course of 3 books. So I was very happy that that ended up being how things are going now, because now I can use that planning with my subsequent books, and I find it's been very helpful.
That's really interesting. So could you talk a little bit more about that idea of like, you know, there's sort of starting a book and then they're starting a trilogy, which I've never written a series. So what was, when you did the proposal, was that like a whole different thing, or did you go into it knowing it was going to be a trilogy?
I went into it knowing it was, I think I went into it knowing it was going to be a trilogy. I feel like I need to like, I do it really fast. I'm pretty sure.
Put you on the spot.
I knew it was going to be more than at least 2 books. But yeah, I remember submitting it, and then the feedback was, you know, great, but we need a plan. This needs to be a little bit more detailed if you're going to actually do all three of these books. So yeah, it just required more in order to make sure I knew the arc of the characters over 3 books, not just 1 book. So yeah, it was a different beast entirely, it felt like, but very insightful, and I learned a lot.
Thank you so much, Sam. Appreciate it. Kathleen, what's your routine to get started?
Well, I have, I read a lot. I read a lot of different things, fiction, but a lot of nonfiction, a lot of news, and I get a lot of ideas from, since I like to write historical novels, I get a lot of ideas from history books. And so I can generally take something and think about, well, all right, if I have this one person, what kind of person, what kind of woman would she fall in love with? And what are the 2 different characters that might inhabit this story and might inhabit the book? And then I do research, and that helps me get into both what the characters are like and what the sort of container of the story is, because it's always going to be some kind of historical thing, like the San Francisco earthquake or something like that. And so that gets me started, and I do outline, but I'm not averse to diverting from the outline. And if I wanted to write in order, I don't think I could do it, because I'm always going to change it around. Something seems to be better if it was in a different order. So a lot of moving things around. And you know, I don't know about the rest of you, but I do a lot of thinking when I'm falling asleep and when I'm waking up. So that's when I try to let my unconscious tell me different things about whatever story I'm working on. And I use the word processor. I'd love to write longhand too, but my writing is terrible. When I was still at work, I used to sneak times of writing by hand, different snippets of things while I was sitting in meetings. So everybody thought I was taking notes, but I was writing very rough drafts of something. But I don't have to do that now. I have plenty of time for that.
Thanks, Kathleen. You were saying you were right, historical, which is, I love historical fiction. Do you feel like you're reading the history and the characters come out of it? You know, like you might think of different characters for as you brought up the San Francisco earthquake, as opposed to you know, a different historical. What do you feel comes first, like the history part or the characters for you?
You know, that depends. It's actually the earthquake story was a continuation with two characters I'd already written into a book, plus new, well, and brand new ones. And for the earthquake story, I found out about someone in San Francisco when I was touring the California Academy of Science. And I heard the story from the docent who was taking us on this backstage tour of the botany collection. And I just thought to myself, that has to be in a book. So I fictionalized that character. So it's a really good question. I don't exactly know. I read something a while ago that a guy had written in, I think, the AARP magazine, that he'd met his wife at a meeting, like at a Votes for Women meeting. And that's how he fell in love with her. And I said, that would be a good way for two women to fall in love back in the 1910s or well, we got the vote in 1920. So that kind of thing is what flows through my head when I read little snippets like that.
Thanks so much, Kathleen. Appreciate it. And Andrew, thanks for being patient. How about you? What's your routine?
I think I pretty much do what everybody does, but you know, when I'm writing a short story, I usually start with like an image or a moment, and then I write about that image or that moment, and then that could be any place within the story. That could be the beginning, in the middle, or the end. And then from there, I kind of, well, is there really a story around this? I have a lot of half-written stories all over my house, to tell you the truth. So choose that image or that moment, then I build the story. I usually sketch it out longhand. I have these journals that I fill up, so and I carry them with me everywhere I go. So I hand write, kind of sketch the story. And then if I really like it, or if I know I'm going somewhere with it, then I write it out on the computer. But a lot of the times the images or the moments are places that I know around town or on my university campus or someplace close by. So sometimes I like to go to that place. I wrote a short story in my collection called Superman's Forest. It was a place right next to my grade school. So when I was writing that story or finishing up the story, I found myself wandering around my old grade school, kind of around the neighborhood where Superman's Forest used to be. I kind of put myself in it and just kind of help me with those final details, just to kind of put it all together too. So I do that a lot. I find myself seeking out the images that I'm trying to explain or the settings that I'm trying to put them in, and just kind of walk in my character's shoes, or just kind of just fill up myself up with as many images as I can. Because I think I'm pretty good with the plot, but when it comes to the details, you really gotta pull them out of me. I'm a really dry writer, so I try and pull that out as much as I can. So the visuals help me a lot, or just placing myself actually in the moment as much as I can helps me a lot.
Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like I kind of do similar. A lot of my books are set in a different state, but it's where I grew up, and I often do like a Google map drive through of places, and be like, was that on that corner or this? But you get to actually walk around in the places that you're writing about. That's great. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I can see how that would be evocative of setting, especially, for sure. All right. All right. Just as a reminder to the audience, feel free to throw in a question in the Q&A. If you want me to get to it, I'll get to it after this next question. I'm going to switch over to reading here a little bit. And I think I'm going to blend, since I'm obviously not going to get to all my questions, I'm going to blend this and give this sort of everybody a choice here, which is you could talk about your favorite character in a book. You could talk about your favorite book, or you could talk about a book that maybe isn't necessarily your favorite now, but maybe was one of your early favorites. So let's think of this almost like a slightly open-ended question about, what if you were to say this is either the character or the book or the moment. When I think of impactful fiction on my life, who is it? If it's a character, or what book was it? Or if you want to talk about an author. So I know that's very broad. So author, character, book, or if you want to go like way back and talk about childhood or teenhood, something that you felt like I want to be a writer because of this thing, right? And I'm going to reverse order again. So Andrew, I know you just talked, but what would you say if someone was like, this is a thing, the book or the character that made me want to be a writer?
Well, for me, what I've been thinking about a lot is, I really started reading. I was introduced to reading by one of my teachers. It was in the 3rd grade. Her name was Mrs. Britton. I loved her to death, and she loved me for some reason. I still don't know why, but we got along really, really well. So that's when she really started bringing in books, and she started handing books to us personally. So she gave me this book called Follow My Leader, which is by James B. Garfield. So it is a young reader's book, but it's about this young man who loses his eyesight in a car accident, in an accident, and he has to learn to deal with this new blindness, and he has to start interacting with his guide dog. So Leader was his guide dog, so it's Follow My Leader. I just love that book so much because it was so different than anything I ever read before, and I think that really started it for me. That I read for entertainment, and I really want people to be entertained by what I write. I like getting out of my mundane world. I'm a university professor. I like to be away from everything that I do in my life when it comes to my reading. So I read a variety of stuff, but I think that's, when I reflect back, that's really the most impactful book. And Mrs. Britton in the 3rd grade, I loved her to death. I think about her all the time. And just, the other books too she gave me, but that one stood out because I think she really kind of looked at me and said, I bet you're gonna like reading, and here's a book I want you to read. And that was like zing, she like hit me right on the spot. And I've been, hooked ever since. So I think that's really where a lot of it comes from.
It's incredible that you mentioned that book, Andrew, because I do remember reading it. We even had someone come in with a guide dog the same month or whatever that we were reading. And it was, I remember it, to this day. It was something like fireworks or something. I can't remember.
Yeah.
I got blinded, yeah. Awesome. Sorry, I forgot order already. Aurora, or sorry, not Aurora. Kathleen. Book, character, author.
I read the questions, that you sent to us, and it started puzzling over everything. And there's been so many different books at different times of my life that were meaningful. So I'm going to talk about 2. When I first came out, and I was in my early 20s, in Cleveland, Ohio, and one of my college friends, actually a very good friend of mine, he and I sort of came out at the same time, and he had found the book The Persian Boy by Mary Renault. So I read everything that he suggested. He was a huge reader too, and I read that book, and I was hooked on Mary Renault. It's a gay book. It's a gay men's book, I guess you would say, but that's because that's what she wrote. But it's really really beautiful story, and that probably made me think about writing. And to this day, I would love to be able to write historical books about like Mary Renault. If you haven't read any of them, give them a try. And there she's holding it up. Unfortunately, that's my least favorite Mary Renault book. When she writes about women, it's completely impenetrable. But the other books were nice. Hey there, baby. Now, more recently, well, for me, recently means the past 20 years, I got started reading Sarah Waters' books. Again, if you want to read some really great books, read Sarah Waters' books. And I'm rereading them right now, and they're fantastic. They're the most fun to read, and she's such a great historical writer. It's another person I would emulate if I could. So that's my kind of take. I like everybody, I just read all kinds of different stuff all the time. So those 2 writers are my big influences.
I adore both, and Sarah Waters. I think might have been one of my first lesbian novels that I read. It was either Tipping the Velvet or one of those, yeah, major moments in my life for sure. Great. All right. Thank you, Kathleen. Appreciate it. Sam, a book, a character, an author.
Yeah, so as I was thinking about this one, I stared at my bookshelf for a long time to try to find the answer to one of these. But I ultimately kept going back to Hermione Granger from the Harry Potter series as being one of my favorite characters. I grew up with her and I just thought it was so awesome that she was, you know, the bookish one, but she helped and saved the day often so many times with the power of the books that she was reading. And I just thought that was great. And was like, yay, books can save the day. Who needs magic when you have books? But both are fun. And so she was probably one of my favorite characters ever. But then I just was thinking about, and you know, since then, since growing up with those books, and I've always just been drawn to books with specifically women characters that break out of the confines of whatever sort of constricting life they're living in. I noticed that's sort of a theme to the types of books that I'm drawn to. And so I read a lot of historical fiction and fantasy and contemporary fiction. So anytime when there's you know, women who are willing to take the step to you know, make a better life for themselves or just be happy in a way that they haven't been. I love those characters. And so that's what I tend to gravitate to in terms of what I read, and try to do that with what I write as well. And another shout out for Sarah Waters. I think she's amazing. That was the first queer book I ever read was Fingersmith, and I just have read everything else of hers ever since, and she's awesome.
Yeah, it really is. And yeah, I think, you know, you bring up Hermione. I think a lot of us sort of like, oh, Hermione. But I think Hermione speaks, and I don't want to speak for you, but it speaks to a lot of us that were, you know, we were the nerd and we were the whatever. But also just, she's the most, you know, powerful witch in the whole series, and the rest of the characters would be lost without her. And I think that's why a lot of people like her, right? About Harry Potter, but it really should be about Hermione. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Sam. Appreciate it. Morgan, how about you? Favorite book, character, author, or just something important to you?
I think I'm going to go with the books. I think there are a couple important books that I read that made me where I am right now. I think the book that opened up romance for me, that made me actually like enjoy romance, which kind of like it makes me roll my eyes a little bit because it's kind of cliche, but I'm still going to go with it. It was The Notebook. I do think watching the movie and being secretly in love with Rachel McAdams played a huge part in why I read the book. So that made it easy to just, you know, picture everything. But then in high school, I was reading a lot of Sarah Dessen, who writes young adult romance. And that's when I started, my writing kind of mimicked her style a bit. And it kind of carried on throughout college. And the first sapphic romance books that I downloaded were Annie on My Mind and Strawberry Summer by Melissa Braden. And I was reading them at the same time. I'm not sure how I was doing it at the same time, but I finished Strawberry Summer first because it was my favorite. And that kind of opened up like this whole idea that while I was discovering my sexuality at the time, I could also write a book like this. And so I took all my love of romance coming from The Notebook and Sarah Dessen, and it kind of just evolved to the stories I write today.
Yeah, thanks, Morgan. And I think maybe not. I'm again maybe speaking for myself, but yeah, I do think that there's often this sort of like occasionally like a block to romance for some of us, and then there's especially maybe for queer people, and then suddenly it's like, oh wait, this does have something to do with me, even this book. So yeah, I haven't heard of Sarah Dessen, but that's interesting. And yeah, Rachel McAdams said, yeah, can watch that movie. I'll watch her in anything, really. Yeah, she's quite yeah, she's she. All right, thanks Morgan. Aurora, how about you? A book, character, author?
Yeah, It's funny. I've kind of flip-flopped on sort of how I was going to answer, and I think some of my flip-flopping has been between Jane Austen and Nora Roberts. I think, I was an English major. I got my master's degree in English, and I think as I was wanting to become a writer, I very much felt like I was supposed to write literary fiction, right? Like that's what you do if you're legit. And yet I sort of grew up on romance novels. My grandmother gave me my first romance novel when I was a freshman in high school and told me to like skip the dirty parts, although it was a fade to black story, and it was straight. And I think for a lot of my life, those two things felt very much at war with one another. And it wasn't until, I was literally in my 30s that I discovered like queer romance, and that sort of like opened a whole thing, and sort of got to a point in my life where I think I felt sort of strong enough that like I gave myself permission to write romance. And so it's sort of a wishy-washy answer in some ways, but I think that idea of sort of coming out of the traditions that you truly love and allowing yourself to pull from all of them to kind of find your voice and forge your own path.
Thanks. Yeah.
And also big kudos for Sarah Waters. Sorry.
Yeah.
Much love.
Another color. Yeah. I feel you. Cause I'm the same. I felt like when I was first writing, it was like, this has to be like, I gotta be the next Virginia Woolf. I've got to, this and that. It's like, I love the stuff that I teach, and I mostly teach, literature, but when I get the chance to read for pleasure, it's always popular fiction, it's romance, it's horror, it's, and that's the stuff I want to write. So, and I think I almost feel like sometimes there's a kind of bridge author a little bit like Morgan brought up and you brought up, that kind of opens your eyes to say, you know what, this stuff's great. And it can be for me too, right? All right, and Allie, thanks again for your patience for going last.
Oh, that's okay. Did I lose my Butch card if I say I love Jane Austen? Question for a friend.
No, you don't lose it. She's the bomb.
Yeah. No, I think mine, I don't think anybody would be surprised. My favorite book is The Godfather. I have a first edition, and it's pretty dog-eared now. I've read it a couple times. But I actually left to go to Florida for a summer to work, and I got a care package from home, and one of the things that it had in it was Interview with the Vampire by Anne Rice. And I love New Orleans. I live right outside of New Orleans. I love to take people on tours of New Orleans. I'm a great tour guide, I think. And I love to take people out to dinner and show them fabulous restaurants. But, I read those books and I thought I really suck at description. I did not realize that the sky in New Orleans is violet and it really is, until I read Anne Rice, and she was, one of my favorites. But I think my go-to would be go back to The Godfather. I mean, there's some lines in there. Those characters are so complex. It's a good family saga. And it's so well written. I mean, the first two movies come out of that first book, and it's something that I try to create in the Devil series, as far as it's not just, about a mob boss, but it's a really kind of a family study, a family dynamic. So it's been something that I've enjoyed. But if you, like I said, if you look at Anne Rice's The Witching Hour, which is long as hell, but it's a great family study, and it's a great way that you can kind of hone your craft a little bit, or at least hope to get that good one day.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things you could get from other writers is saying, the little, almost like the pockets of our own writing that's not there. And I absolutely agree with you about like description and Anne Rice. I think she's half the reason I moved to New Orleans. I was so obsessed with those books in high school. I was like, I have to move to New Orleans. I've got to meet vampires. Was devastated when she died recently.
I
but
have the
yeah,
whole
she's-
set. I have the whole set autographed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
One of them she
That's
did
amazing.
not decide to autograph, and I called her house and said, you must autograph this book. And and everybody told me I was crazy, but they called me back, and guess what? So I have like one of 2 copies that's autographed. And a lady wanted to know if I wanted it autographed because I was really a big fan, or if I was going to sell it on eBay. And I thought the other day, like, she just passed. Poor thing just passed away. So
Yeah.
maybe that might be a possibility.
Well, thanks, everybody. It was lovely chatting with you. I apologize for that weird thing that was happening at the beginning again. And it was nice seeing everybody and getting to chat with you.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Charlotte. Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye. Have a good day.